The courtroom was quieter than usual that morning. Not the kind of silence that comes from routine, but the kind that settles before something seismic. The gallery was packed, yet no one dared to cough. Journalists sat hunched over their keyboards, fingers frozen mid-keystroke. Attorneys whispered in the shadows like something sacred was about to be unearthed. Even the judge glanced at the sealed folder in front of her with a rare mix of curiosity and caution. The name Marshall Mathers was not on the docket, yet his presence clung to the walls like humidity. The entire trial, which had begun as a high-profile investigation into financial misconduct and potential abuse within the entertainment industry, had shifted. The defendant, Sean Diddy, had entered court that day like he always did, tailored suit, calm swagger, eyes calculating. But when the prosecutor stood and announced their next witness, the tension spiked. The state calls Paul Rosenberg to the stand, and the gallery collectively inhaled. Rosenberg, longtime manager and legal representative of Eminem, stepped forward with the quiet grace of a man who had weathered decades behind the scenes. His suit was modest, his expression unreadable. He adjusted his tie, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore in. The prosecutor wasted no time. "Mr. Rosenberg, you've managed Mr. Mathers' career since when?" "Since 1997, before his first official release." "And in that time, was there ever an attempt by Mr. Diddy to collaborate or work with Eminem?" Rosenberg paused. "Several, both publicly and privately." "And how did Mr. Mathers respond?" "Respectfully, but always distant." "Why?" Another pause. Rosenberg's eyes shifted across the room to where Diddy sat, arms folded. "Because Marshall didn't trust him." A wave rippled through the courtroom like static before a storm. "Could you elaborate?" There were whispers early on. Stories about people going missing, albums being shelved, artists being pressured, reputations dismantled quietly. It was never direct, never provable. But there was always chaos around Mr. Commies, and Marshall's philosophy has always been simple: protect your energy. Did this lack of trust ever translate into formal decisions? Rosenberg nodded. "In 2001, we introduced something called the Conflict Containment Clause into his Aftermath contract. It stated that Slim Shady would not appear at any event, venue, or show affiliated with Mr. Diddy without explicit legal clearance from Aftermath's executive board." The prosecutor stepped closer. "Was that clause ever used?" "Multiple times, most notably after the 2001 MTV Awards after-party." "What happened?" "Diddy attempted to corner Eminem for a photo. Marshall left the event entirely. The next day, I got a call from someone on Bad Boy's side. They said, and I quote, 'Your boy just cost himself a lot of doors.'" "Was there ever a direct threat?" "Not exactly, but things started happening. Bookings got canceled. Promoters suddenly backed out. Magazine features disappeared. It was never loud, just consistent." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Did Eminem ever confront Mr. Commies?" "Once, backstage at the 2003 Grammys. Diddy tried to shake his hand. Marshall nodded, but he didn't say anything, then walked away." "Why?" "He told me later, 'I don't shake hands with puppeteers.'" That phrase clung to the ceiling of the courtroom like smoke. A puppeteer. Someone who didn't just manipulate artists, but the entire environment around them. "Do you believe Eminem's distance was about paranoia?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Rosenberg said without blinking. It was protection. From everything we've heard in this trial, I think Marshall saw the danger long before any of us did. The judge called a short recess, but no one left. Not the media, not the gallery, not even the defense, because something had changed. This was no longer about financial misconduct. This was about who dared to say no to influence. When the court resumed, the prosecutor didn't waste a second. The state calls Michael Kravitz. A man in his 40s took the stand with a calm that chilled the room. He was a digital forensics expert, the kind who uncovers secrets that were meant to stay buried. "State your role," the prosecutor said. "Cyber recovery and metadata reconstruction. I specialize in deleted communications." "And during your analysis, did you come across any digital evidence related to Bad Boy Entertainment and Aftermath records?" "Yes." He connected his laptop to the courtroom screen. "Let's start with this email, dated July 12, 2004. The screen lit up. Subject: the Detroit problem. Body: "We need to stop the slim narrative before it spreads. Puff doesn't want heat on that dinner snub. Float the detox rumor. Anything. Just get people talking about Dre instead." A quiet gasp swept the room. "What does this suggest, Mr. Kravitz?" "Coordinated narrative suppression. Bad Boy's PR team actively worked to redirect public attention from questions about Eminem's refusal to engage with Mr. Commies." Another file lit up. A group chat from 2007. "If M keeps ignoring Puff, make him look ungrateful. Push the Biggie legacy angle. Spin it." What is this? A PR strategy, not a feud. A campaign to discredit Eminem for choosing distance. The prosecutor let that hang in the air before asking the final question. "What was the most damning piece of evidence you found?" Kravitz didn't flinch. "A document titled Conflict Containment Strategy, written by Bad Boy's legal team. It ranked artists considered resistant to brand alignment. Eminem was ranked number 1. Why?" The note read, "Too principled, too loyal to Dre, too unpredictable to control." The gallery gasped. The judge sat up. Diddy finally blinked. "Was there any direct message from Mr. Combs referencing Eminem?" "One." Kravitz pulled it up. A voice memo dated 2005. Transcript: "Let him do his thing. He ain't stupid. He sees the game and don't want to be part of mine. That's cool. But when the winds change, remember, he chose exile." The judge looked rattled. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was strategy. Documented, deliberate, decades old. A strategy of silence, of refusal, of protection. The courtroom didn't breathe for a full minute. Because in an industry built on noise, Eminem's greatest move was never raising his voice. It was walking away. And now, finally, someone was listening. The courtroom lights had barely settled when the prosecution called their next witness. He was tall, ex-military, with the kind of presence that didn't need a uniform to command attention. His name was Marcus Ellsworth, a private security contractor who had worked with both Aftermath and Bad Boy Entertainment during the early 2000s. When he took the stand, the room adjusted itself around him. Jaws tightened, pens paused. His voice, gravel thick and sharp, pierced the air with precision. "State your position," the prosecutor began. "I provided personal security detail and event intelligence for VIP entrances, exits, and crowd control at high-risk music industry functions." "How many events involved both Mr. Mathers and Mr. Combs?" "3 that I personally covered, and in every one, One of them left early. Why is that significant? Because it wasn't coincidence. It was protocol. I had direct orders. From whom? From Paul Rosenberg and Dr. Dre. If Diddy shows, Marshall leaves. Every time. A new kind of silence followed. Not stunned, not confused, but the sound of understanding locking into place. Was this about ego? Not even close. It was about trust, or the complete lack of it. There was an understanding, unspoken, unbroken, that proximity meant exposure. Exposure to what, Mr. What? Ellsworth? He stared directly at Diddy. To risk, of image, of brand, of control, of getting pulled into something you can't walk out of without scars. Tell us about the Las Vegas incident. 2003, Caesar's Palace, private celebration hosted by Dr. Dre and Interscope execs. Diddy was already inside. We were prepping a VIP entrance for Marshall and Dre. Suddenly, Rosenberg called, voice flat. Abort. Diddy's there. Pull Dre too if you have to. They both left the city that night. Was that level of caution common? Only with one man. I've worked around murderers, drug lords, athletes, billionaires. I've never seen a team react that fast, that coldly, over one name. Not even when Suge Knight showed up uninvited. Only Diddy got that treatment. The prosecutor walked toward the jury. Do you believe Eminem felt threatened? Not physically, but professionally, socially, reputation-wise. Diddy doesn't just burn people, he buries them. Being near him isn't heat, it's gravity. You get too close, your choices disappear. A low hum passed through the gallery. The prosecutor shifted pace. Did you ever witness Diddy attempt to contact Eminem directly? Yes. BET Awards After Party, Atlanta, 2006. Eminem wasn't even scheduled to attend but showed up last minute to support a shady artist. Diddy spotted him near the VIP lounge. I was within 10 feet. I heard Diddy say, "Tonight's the night. I'm gonna squash this bull's tea." What happened? Marshall got wind, left immediately. No exit photos, no goodbyes, just gone. And Diddy's reaction? He was livid. Told his assistant, "This dude acts like I'm poison. He thinks I don't know why he stays away, but I do, and he should too." Then he slammed his drink and walked out. The courtroom didn't move. The heat in the room wasn't from anger, but from revelation. Eminem wasn't reacting to ego. He was moving based on intelligence, instinct, maybe even something darker. The prosecution turned back to the stand. Ellsworth, in your professional opinion, was this avoidance justified? Yes. It wasn't emotional. It was operational. It was executed like protocol. Thank you. And then came the curveball. The prosecutor introduced an audio recording captured during a 2004 European Music Festival. The court clerk tapped play. It was lo-fi, muffled, but two voices could be made out. One was unmistakably Diddy. The other was unidentified. "You know he's ducking me, right?" Diddy said. "Eminem?" "Yeah, can't even say hi." A pause, then laughter. "I ain't mad. Just means he knows. He sees it. What I do, how I move. He don't want that karma." The tape stopped. No one said anything, because the man at the center of the storm had just admitted the wins were his to begin with. The courtroom remained in stasis for a beat before the prosecutor called their next witness. Denise Holloway, a former bad boy publicist who had handled nearly every major scandal, album rollout, and damage control effort between 1998 and 2012. Her deposition was pre-recorded, shown on the main screen. Her voice was aged, worn, but clear. "Let's not pretend we didn't know," she said flatly. "Everyone knew Eminem wouldn't touch Puff with a 10-foot pole, and it wasn't personal beef. It was survival. You could feel it in the room every time both names came up. There was a rule. If Slim's invited, Puff chills. If Puff's in the room, Slim's not showing." She detailed moments where Puff would joke, half laughing, half serious. "Why Slim never show? He scared of me?" And she would always shrug, never knowing how to respond. But what haunted her more was what she began to see, in meetings, in parties, in red carpets. Puff wasn't obsessed with Slim because of competition, she said. He was obsessed because Slim stayed clean, untouchable. Puff couldn't manipulate him, couldn't buy him, couldn't control him, and that pissed him off. The video paused. The courtroom didn't. Every single juror was visibly reprocessing years of headlines, missed collaborations, unexplained absences. "Ladies and gentlemen," the prosecutor said, turning from the screen to the gallery, "you've now seen the paper trail, heard the witnesses, and listened to the man himself admit what his influence meant." Then came one last piece of evidence. A handwritten note recovered from a journal belonging to a Shady Records staffer, dated 2003, no signature. It read, "He keeps trying to get close. I keep saying no. He doesn't understand. It's not fear. It's instinct." The prosecutor let that hang. "That instinct saved him," she said quietly. "And now, decades later, it's finally being heard." The gallery remained still. For the first time, the court understood that Eminem's absence wasn't a void. It was a shield. Not silence as a sign of arrogance, but silence as a sign of knowledge. He wasn't running away. He was running ahead. And that changed everything. By the time the court reconvened the following morning, no one cared about the original charges anymore. The case had evolved beyond its legal skeleton. What had started as a financial and reputational audit of Diddy had transformed into a forensic study of influence, silence, and survival in the music industry. The courtroom felt different now, not like a place where arguments were made, but like a place where truths had been cornered and forced to speak. The prosecutor stood and calmly announced their next piece of evidence. State Exhibit 117, a sealed, authenticated wiretap recording dated June 15, 2002, cleared for public submission by the Department of Justice. The court clerk passed headphones to each juror while the transcript glowed across the monitors. What unfolded in the next 4 minutes unraveled everything the courtroom thought it knew. Voice 1, redacted, believed to be a senior executive in the industry, asked, "What's going on with Slim? Why he keep dodging Puff?" Voice 2, confirmed as a bad boy associate, replied, "Because he knows. He saw what happened to Shine. He saw what happened to Kim. He saw how that club thing disappeared. He don't want any of that on his name." Voice 1, "So he's scared?" Voice 2, "Nah, he's not scared. He's calculated. Dre told him, stay clean to stay alive." Voice 1, "So he's out?" Voice 2, "He's been out, way before y'all noticed." When the audio ended, the courtroom sat suspended in shock. For the first time, the idea that Eminem had been merely distant or arrogant evaporated. He had been warned, And more than that, he had listened. The prosecution's next witness took the stand with a briefcase in hand and a past that had touched the darker edges of the music industry. His name was Agent Howard Collins, a retired federal investigator who had overseen multiple operations into entertainment-linked laundering and racketeering cases in the early 2000s. The courtroom adjusted around him like a body preparing for impact. "Agent Collins," the prosecutor began, "can you confirm the authenticity of that wiretap?" "Yes. It was part of a larger investigation into financial irregularities and interpersonal coercion involving multiple entertainment figures, including parties associated with Bad Boy Entertainment. And based on your analysis, what does that conversation suggest?" "It indicates that Eminem was not simply avoiding Mr. Commies out of personality clash. He was acting under private advisement that association could lead to long-term exposure, both legal and reputational. In plain terms, he was told, 'Stay clear or get buried.' And he listened. The words settled like lead. Was Mr. Combs considered high risk in your investigations?" "Yes, he appeared on a list internally circulated within a private security firm in 2004, labeled Red Zone Personalities." "Was Mr. Mathers on that list?" "No." "Why not?" "Because he never got close enough to be flagged." The prosecutor turned toward the jury. Let that sink in. In an industry where proximity is power, he stayed so far out of reach, he never even triggered surveillance. She paused, then introduced a final item from Agent Collins, an internal strategy memo titled Brand Separation Directives, drafted by Aftermath's legal counsel in January 2000. The screen displayed its subject line, Protecting the Brand. Structural walls between Eminem and Combies. The memo was clinical, composed like a surgical risk report. Phrases like liability saturation, cultural instability, and containment through absence flashed across the screen. One line stood out. Association with Puff may compromise authenticity perception, lead to unpredictable entanglements, and erode Dre's strategic autonomy. The prosecutor stepped aside and let the jury read it for themselves. No voices, no commentary, just silence and comprehension. And then she brought in someone the courtroom hadn't expected. Not an executive, not a lawyer, not a celebrity. A man named James Colbert. He had no formal rank, no verified title. Just a past. A former runner for Bad Boy, the kind of assistant who exists on the outer rim of importance, but the inner circle of secrets. He took the stand with a hesitant confidence, like a man who had waited years for someone to ask what he saw. "State your role under Mr. Commies," the prosecutor said. "I carried things, set up party spaces, got information, drove people, got coats, delivered silence." "Delivered what?" "Silence. My job wasn't always to make noise. Sometimes it was to make sure others didn't." The judge straightened, in her seat. "Proceed carefully." Colbert nodded once. "There was a night in 2005, BET weekend. Diddy was hosting a pre-party at a hotel in L.A. Word got out that Eminem was performing a set nearby. Diddy found out. Told me, go find out where he's staying. Don't knock. Don't speak. Just know. And did you? I didn't have to. By the time I got to the elevator, Marshall had already checked out. What happened next? Diddy lost it. He started pacing the suite, throwing pillows, snapping at staff. He said, he's too smart. He knows what I'm trying to do. Every time I move, he's 2 steps ahead. What did that mean to you? That Eminem was watching, and always walking away before the trap closed. Did Diddy ever express resentment? All the time. He'd say, "Slim ain't scared of me. He's scared of what being near me will cost him." The courtroom locked into place like a puzzle piece fallen home. The prosecutor turned to the gallery. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've now heard it from every angle. From lawyers, from bodyguards, from executives, from whisper campaigns, from wiretaps, from hotel suites. The story is always the same. This was not rivalry. This was not coincidence. This was a calculated, deliberate, consistent refusal." She took a breath and added, "And sometimes the loudest message a person can send is simply never showing up." Then she played one last piece of audio. A scratchy, low-quality backstage recording captured during a 2004 festival. Two voices. Diddy's unmistakable. "You know he's ducking me, right?" "Who?" "Eminem. Can't even say hi. I ain't mad. Just means he sees it. He knows how I move. He don't want that karma." When the clip ended, no one looked away. No one dared to blink. Because the man they had spent decades speculating about had just admitted it. Not in court, not on the record, but in a moment of unfiltered honesty. And that confession echoed through the courtroom louder than any diss track, any press release, any award speech. The prosecution rested for the day, but no one left their seat. Not because they were frozen, but because they were finally beginning to understand. This wasn't just about survival in an industry. This was a man who never needed to survive Diddy Comb, because he never gave him the chance. The courtroom was filled with a strange quiet the next morning, not the silence of fear or anticipation, but the kind that came after revelation. Everyone in the room already knew the truth. They had heard it whispered between hotel walls, tucked into legal clauses, embedded in intercepted phone calls and blurred voice memos. But they were waiting for it to be said out loud, officially, legally, irreversibly. Eminem was never avoiding Diddy out of arrogance. He was preserving something that no one else had the vision to protect: his freedom. The prosecution stepped forward, calm and sure, holding a sealed affidavit in hand. "Your Honor," the lead prosecutor said, "we submit for the record State Exhibit 131, an affidavit verified and notarized by a former high-ranking member of Aftermath's legal division. The document contains internal notes from multiple meetings held between 2002 and 2008 with Marshall Mathers, detailing his stance regarding Sean Comey's." The judge gave a slow nod. The prosecutor opened the folder and began to read. During a closed-door compliance session in April 2003, Mr. Mathers expressed grave concern about being drawn into what he described as a dark current within certain sectors of the music industry. He specifically named Sean Comey's as a figure of deep unease. The room barely breathed. The prosecutor continued. He stated, and I quote, "There are two kinds of fame, one that finds you and one that swallows you. Diddy's is the second." The words hit the room like a funeral bell, quiet, heavy, absolute. Mr. Mathers was advised at the time that he had the legal right to decline any affiliation or partnership. His response was documented clearly. "That's fine. I won't battle him. I'll disappear from his radar. No tracks, no clubs, no pictures, no ties. I don't want to look back in 20 years and regret the handshake I gave at the wrong table." One juror closed their eyes. Another leaned forward, elbows on knees, as if the weight of every collaboration they had hoped for now made sense through the lens of this single quote. The affidavit went further. In subsequent meetings, Mr. Mathers reported several indirect approaches from intermediaries attempting to arrange casual or neutral ground encounters with Mr. Combs. Each was declined. At one point, he said, "That's not a door I ever want open, because I might not be the one to close it." The document closed with a single line, one the courtroom would later repeat in interviews, headlines, and documentaries. His absence wasn't silence, it was strategy. The prosecution stepped back, her role now complete. And then the final witness was introduced. Not a celebrity or an insider, but a journalist. A woman who had spent nearly 2 decades covering the music industry from its bloodied backstage to its polished red carpets. She had followed Eminem's rise, tracked Bad Boy's evolution, and documented the quiet war no one else seemed to notice. "I interviewed over 70 insiders during my career," she began. "Producers, dancers, PR managers, drivers. Every single one said the same thing about Eminem and Diddy. They never mixed. Not once. Not at a party. Not in a studio. Not even in the same frame." "Why?" the prosecutor asked. "Because Eminem understood something most people spend their whole careers pretending not to see. Proximity costs. Alignment costs. And when you align with someone whose name is whispered more than spoken, whose past is littered with people who vanished, you eventually become another body on the pile." The courtroom was still. No coughs, no chairs shifting, no lawyers whispering. She continued. Eminem didn't avoid Diddy to be mysterious. He avoided Diddy because he had something to protect. His mind, his art, his daughter, his truth. And that made him dangerous. Not to the public, but to the system that needed artists to play along. She reached into her bag and held up a copy of an unreleased article draft from 2008. In one paragraph, I wrote, "Hip-hop is full of survivors. But Eminem? He's one of the few who never had to survive Diddy because he never gave him the chance." It wasn't poetry, it was prophecy. The judge called for final remarks. The defense, tired and cornered, offered no meaningful rebuttal. They couldn't deny the digital trail, the wiretaps, the security protocols, the confessions whispered behind closed doors. And as the jury stood to begin deliberations, something unexpected happened. No one in the room moved. Not the reporters, not the attorneys, not the spectators. They sat in the stillness of understanding, knowing that what had unfolded over the last 4 days wasn't just a court case. It was a quiet unmasking. Not just of Diddy Combe, but of the ecosystem that shielded him, enabled him, excused him. And in the middle of that storm was the shadow of a man who never stepped into the courtroom, but somehow loomed over every single moment. Headlines exploded within hours. Courtroom shock. Eminem's silence was a shield. Legacy untouched. Why Eminem never joined the Bad Boy empire. The power of staying away. One blog post summed it up best with a single sentence that rocketed across Twitter and late-night monologues. He never dissed Diddy. He just disappeared from him. And in the end, that silence said everything. The trial would go on. There would be more names, more testimony, more secrets spilled like ink across the marble floor. But for Eminem, the trial had ended long before it began. Because sometimes the smartest move isn't what you say. It's what you never allow yourself to be near. And sometimes the only way to win is never playing the game at all.